Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome from CBC Dubai. Yes, we really do think well-being matters, and that's what it's all about today. I'm not going to take way too much of your time because we have an amazing keynote speaker and and I'd like to say girlfriend, which is actually even more important to me. Anyway, actually, it's important to all of us. The wonderful thing is that our sponsors are the ones that make these things happen for us. They are amazing. They always have your back, and they're always making sure that our businesses grow and thrive. But to make sure our businesses grow and thrive, we're actually going to have some happiness, I think, behind it. So the other thing here is that I want to know to tell you how much teamwork we have happening. We actually have our council, our sister councils that are on board as well. We do a lot of teamwork with the other councils. So thank you so much for their behind the scenes work. I mentioned while we were off camera that this session will become interactive at a certain point. So if you wish to be online, if you wish to be on camera, put your hand up. If you'd like to put your questions in the chat box, just do that. If you actually just want to turn your audio on, just write me a note. I'll put you on, and we'll probably have that a little bit later on in the session. So without any further ado, as they say, I'd like to have Dr. Louise Lambert speak for us. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Diana, and welcome to everybody to the Canadian Business Council Phoenix series. It gives me a lot of pleasure to be here. One, because I'm Canadian. Two, Diana's my friend. And three, I get to talk about cool stuff that I do, and I hope you'll find it cool also. All right, so what I need from you today at some point is to have your phone in your hand, which you probably already will have. We're going to do like a little poll, but otherwise I'm very happy to take questions along the way, and or you can keep them at the end as well. So I will let you determine how you want to do that. So no, not that yet. We're going to start over here. All right. So let's just get going. We're here to talk about why happiness and well-being at work specifically, but really a little bit everywhere in life actually matter. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why it matters, what it actually means, and then give you a couple of ideas of how you can make that happen. But to begin, I just want to give you a full disclosure. Yes, this is what I do. You can find me at happinessmatters.org, and I do pretty much everything around positive psychology. So programming and content delivery, certainly, but webinars, podcasts, and a whole bunch of cool stuff. So my role today is to give you information and just to say hello, then you know who I am. And if you want to chat afterwards, then I'm happy to do that. So a little bit about me. I'm a big nerd. I really like research. I do a lot of research. I am transitioning out of university where I teach, but I'm also a counseling psychologist and clinical supervisor. So science really matters to me. And I think one of my biggest strengths is that I translate science into practical action that people can actually take. And I think there's an advantage to doing that. One, science has a lot to offer. It's just incomprehensible to the average person. And in large part because scientists like to use a lot of big words and we talk largely to ourselves. And so my goal is really to make some of that come alive for you and put some of that into just very plain, simple English so that you can improve your life and feel better about what's happening. So I have been in the region about 10 years. Wow, that's a long time. And I do have friends. I've worked at a couple of different places, done a couple of cool projects with a number of cool organizations, just some examples here. So let's just kind of jump right in. This is where you can use your phone. You can just scan the QR code, or you can just go straight to menti.com and use the code there. And I'm just going to bring up the actual website where that is. I'm going to swap over here in a second, so do not despair. And of course, they wouldn't be, working from home or online if we didn't do it this way. All right, I'm hoping you can see my screen.
Could you put the code up one more time, please? Is that
Yeah,
possible?
so it's right. If you can see the I know you're awesome, just look at the line above it. I'm hoping you can see that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So use the code 5913-5149, and you can go ahead and respond right there. And the question is essentially saying, I know you're awesome. You know you're awesome. Everybody knows you're awesome. But basically, does your organization know you're awesome? Does your manager know you're awesome? And can you rate your manager's ability to bring out that awesomeness? So I'm hoping you can see this screen. Yeah. And you can go, yep, wonderful. Already getting some responses. Great. So the range is, I'm not sure they know I exist. I'm hoping that's not your case, but yeah, it happens on occasion. Other people might be, yeah, I'm seen, but it's just sort of this perfunctory, I'm a box to tick, whatever. Other people might be a little bit more fortunate. They support me. Maybe your manager supports you, but it's kind of at your insistence. You have to initiate. You have to say, hey, what about, could I, can I? And it's at your urging. And then other people, I always call these the magical unicorns, and are extremely fortunate. And these are the people who believe you are genuinely a better person as a result of working in your organization. So I hope that is the case, because that does not happen very often. But if that is you, well done, don't quit, carry on, and we're all secretly jealous of you. So if anybody would like to answer a little bit more, carry on. This poll will stay open, so you can keep going in a moment. I will switch you to the second question. All right, this should pop up for you as well. If it hasn't popped up for you yet on your phone, you can just give it a quick refresh and it should be there. And here you can just type in so thinking about your own emotional experience at work on any given day, what words would you use? Try to keep your profanity at a minimum, if there's any. But of course, it could be great, fantastic, wonderful. It could be so bored, miserable, awful. Wow, how do I get out of this? Whirlwind. Okay, that's a good one. And you can answer them multiple times. So I think you can have up to four options there. Feel I can do more. Okay, I think that's a lot of people's experience. It's like, it's not bad. It's just, it's just there, right? Excited. Okay, fantastic. Busy. Yep. I think most workplaces. Frustrated. That's increasingly people's experience. Okay, it's either excited or exited. Both are good, are good responses. Overwhelmed. I'm trying to think what I would add to mine. I think mine would be more like, meh, it's okay. Just, meh. All right, balanced. This is interesting. Okay, happy, plateau, just kind of there. It's kind of like, if I stayed here another 10 years, this would be exactly the same thing. Yeah. Growth again, sure, I'm sure I can do more. There's that same, I always call that same burst of human capital that's dying to get out. Okay, relaxed, great. Impactful. I'm most curious as to where people work, so maybe we can share stories after. Impactful, I love that. That's a great day, actually. You feel like what you do is impactful. Fantastic. All right, so keep these in mind. Again, you can continue responding throughout the talk, whatever mood strikes your fancy. If you think of another good word, you're welcome to pop it in there. We can check again at the end. But this is sort of to get you thinking about some of the themes that are going to be talking about today, and one of which is really this emotional experience at work. So well-being at work is, has a lot to do with work, has a lot to do with the people that are there. has a lot to do with the people we answer to, has also a lot to do with our own mindset, but all of these have to do with how it feels in the workplace. So I really like to characterize work almost like a relationship. It has to feel good, otherwise what's the point? It's not enough to be in one, we also want to feel good while we're there. All right, let me just swap screen again and come back to our presentation. Now just let me know, are you still, has this moved to my PowerPoint? I'm hoping.
No, you're at the QR code.
It's still there. Oh, at the QR. Okay. And let me just do this. There we go. All right.
Yep,
Why work
that's it.
matters? Wonderful.
Why
Okay.
work matters.
I did a good like 5 or 6 minutes one day chatting away and everybody's being very polite. So now I'm like, no, I need feedback before I move on. Okay, so certainly our emotional experience at work matters, but I think it's important to take a little bit of a step back and to think about why work itself matters and what it actually contributes for us. And, you know, the obvious answer is, yeah, it pays. I mean, of course, but work is more than that. And if we're thinking about, you know, something that pays, I mean, there's a reason that we've become maybe an accountant or not, a nurse, a doctor, a dentist. We choose because there's an element of interest, there's an element of growth, there's an element of personal development that we seek throughout work. So it's not enough just to say something pays. There's more to work than just a paycheck. You know, it's also good use of our time. It actually structures the day. It tells us what to do. And there's a reason that this matters. If you look at people who are unemployed, their subjective well-being or life satisfaction is actually quite low. And this is one of the reasons. There's no purpose. There's no reason to be somewhere at a specific time. In fact, there's actually no reason to even get up in the morning. So work also is important in structuring our days, structuring our time, without which the average human struggles to fill in and do on their own. I think as many of us have seen during pandemic, we're kind of working all over the place and there's those rigid structures are no longer there. So work is beneficial in that way also. Work is also a great context where we go to actually feel good about ourselves. And people will say, well, that sort of goes without saying, but actually, no, it doesn't. You know, if we think about the purpose of school, for example, or university, or again, relationships, these are opportunities for us to feel good about ourselves. There's a lots of positive reinforcement. In grade 4, you get the little gold star. And then as we get older, you get a good job. And then as we get older and we finally hit the workplace, we're lucky if we get a good morning. But that is a gift that work can give us. It can be a place where we go to feel good about ourselves through giving us, you know, opportunities for growth, or again, somebody giving us the equivalent of that little gold star. So in the absence of work and in the absence of good work that provides these rewards, most of us do not feel that great about ourselves. You know, parenting, certainly, especially if you've got teenagers, but just in everyday life. And so work provides us with that input or that stimulus, if you will. Work is also a place where we gain our identity. So doctors, nurses, lawyers, psychologists, even, although most people think we're crazy, but generally speaking, professional identity matters. It's how we demarcate ourselves from the average person. And this is another benefit that work offers us. So it's not just something we do. We're not just pushing paper from one side of the desk to the other, but it defines who we are. Now, there's maybe also problems with that, but that is one of the benefits that we get to say, yeah, I'm a whatever, or I work at wherever. And this can really boost our sense of self. Work engages the mind, gives us something to learn, gives us something to do, gives us a way to grow. Again, if we didn't work, short of reading the newspaper or scrolling social media, it would actually be really hard to engage our mind for big chunks of time. We know that when the mind is engaged, this boosts our subjective well-being, provided it's engaged well, but the mind can certainly, or sorry, work can certainly do that for us. It's a way to meet people, not only meet people, but meet people you probably would never connect with otherwise. I think about people I've made friends with in the past, and you end up making friends with people in different careers, different age brackets, different socioeconomic groups that you probably would not run into contact with anywhere else. So this is a real rich source of social stimulation, but it also allows us to know ourselves in very different ways. Some of you have very meaningful jobs. Earlier in the little Mentimeter, somebody said, my work is very impactful. That's a huge source of well-being right there. The ability to, conceptualize work as something that can transform other people's lives or that can transform the world in some way. What a fantastic gift. And yeah, work adds value. All work matters, whether you're pushing the paperclip from right to left, if you're contributing in some way to the growth of societies, to the growth of communities, to stakeholders in your nation, or even in other countries. This is a massive reason to feel as though what we do matters, but a sense of belonging, a sense of contribution, again, meaning and purpose. So work is much more than just something that we do, but in fact, if we think about it otherwise, work is a real gift that organizations give to employees, not just for money, but as a way to spread happiness and well-being throughout society. When employees are well, they bring that home to their families. It also spreads to customers, other stakeholders, through products, through services. And in a sense, organizations end up contributing to the happiness and well-being of societies everywhere. So work matters. It's not just something we do because we're bored. And this relationship is reciprocal. So happy employees contribute to the workplace, happy workplaces contribute to the lives of employees, and this trickles back at home to communities, parenting, relationships. So this relationship, is mutually beneficial to both parties. However, this is often misunderstood, and I'm probably part of that misunderstanding as well. So unfortunately, the happiness industry, and first of all, I just want to clarify, I hate that word, happiness. We use it because it's the word that people understand, but in the scientific literature, we call it subjective well-being. But because some of these topics are a little bit maybe heavy or very philosophical or very scientific to discuss, they've unfortunately been broken down and simplified a little bit too much. So much of what ends up being passed on as happiness at work sometimes look like this, lots of fun in games, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it ends up trivializing what it is that we're talking about. Some organizations are, trying to emulate the Google workspace, ends up looking a little bit like a five-star resort. Organizations end up getting very focused on pizza parties, awards, prizes, celebrations, and there's nothing wrong with that, but and let's not forget yoga, because everybody knows you can out yoga a bad boss, and of course the ubiquitous fruit box. I don't have anything against these things, but if you're not getting on with your boss, yoga is going to do nothing for you. If there's practices and policies that you feel are unfair, the banana will do nothing to change that. And so while lots of organizations are well-meaning and are maybe trying to encourage the spirit of well-being, they end up focusing a little bit more on fun, entertainment, and that's not totally bad, but it's just missing the point a little bit. Or they end up focusing on wellness, and it ends up being about physical well-being, which also there's nothing wrong with that, but it's also missing the point a little bit. So what ends up also happening is that sometimes organizations sort of do well-being to employees. It ends up being a slight form of remedial punishment sometimes, but it lets the organization off the hook. So happiness and well-being at work again, is a mutually beneficial relationship. It's a reciprocal relationship. Both parties have a role to play. And it's not only employees that have to do things. It's not only the organization that has to do things. The other issue with construing well-being as, fruits and yoga and games and whatnot is that it overlooks real issues that really do need to be taken care of, but it also overlooks opportunities that also needs to be maximized and taken care of. So, hopefully by the end of today, I can change some of this definition for you. Part of this definition that I want to talk about is really about positive psychology. So positive psychology is essentially where all of this well-being and happiness stuff came from. And unfortunately, it too has been sort of hijacked by the happiness industry. People focus on the word positive and they kind of forget the word psychology. It is a legitimate branch of psychology. It is a science. We rely on the empirical tools of measurement. There's theory, construction, there's different concepts, different constructs. There's a number of peer-reviewed academic articles. There's a tremendous amount of research taking place in this area. And it is much more than just happiness, but it's about taking well-being as seriously as ill-being. So generally speaking, psychology tends to focus down here. So we focus on everything that makes people miserable. And, that's good. We can tell you what will make you miserable. We can tell you how to, mess up your life, mess up your kids, and mess up your relationships. We're wonderful with that. But for a long time, psychology was simply focused on the negative side. And while there were benefits to that, what it also meant is that if you didn't actually have a problem, you were just kind of like, you're fine. Or if you were doing really well, it just kind of stopped there. And there was no real way to move beyond simply not being miserable. So the whole framework or the whole assumption of positive psychology is really this. Negative emotions, problems, liabilities, all of these things need to be taken care of, but they are being taken care of. Most organizations know full well that's where they need to focus, and there's plenty of consultants that can help you do that. Positive psychology takes a mildly different approach. It says, okay, we get that. We don't need to worry there. But there's two other groups of people that we do need to worry about. And if we don't, as many of you said earlier, feel I could do more, this is where you come in. So this experience of, gosh, what else is there for me? So if we look at this top end group, the flourishing group, these people are the ones who are doing great. I call these the magical unicorns. They get up in the morning and they're like, yeah, life's awesome. They have really great relationships. They experience lots of positive emotion. They feel that they have a purpose. They have goals. There's a reason for them to be there. These are the people who actively benefit organizations. They add proper value. And I think every organization wants these people. If we look at percentage wise, people in this depressed zone are also a small percentage of the population, maybe 5 to 8%. They just tend to take up a lot of attention, resources, and oxygen. Flourishing people, kind of like 8 to 10%. They're equally kind of small. That's why I call them the rare unicorn in the forest. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people who are languishing through no fault of their own. And what's happening with them is they're great, they're wonderful, they feel they could do more, they want to do more, they have all these great ideas, they're optimistic, they have skills and talents, and they feel good, but there's nowhere to do it. Nobody's asking, nobody's saying, hey, you want to do something cool? People are just saying, you okay? Yeah. And that's where it ends. We're losing a lot of talent by not focusing on the positive. So positive psychology is about how do we get more people into the flourishing zone, but how do we light the fire under these people who are languishing and get them feeling at their best, but also get the conditions within organizations right so that these people can flourish. Again, we're always looking at that mutual relationship. So it's how do we capitalize on what is existing and move people up so that organizations are actively benefiting and we have fewer people just doing a job, because that's not very satisfying over time. And there's always a point in the presentation where everything sticks and freezes. Not a worry, I can sort this out. That's why I'm a doctor. Okay. All right. So if we think about then, what is positive psychology all about and what is it we're trying to get? It's, we study these people who are flourishing at the top end, those magical unicorns. And we try and think about and study and sort of pick apart and look at the conditions, but also the actions and the thoughts and the things that these people do on a daily basis. And over the past 20 years since positive psychology has emerged, we've been able to figure out, what do these people do that's different? People do to bring themselves to the top of that scale? What do these people do to make their lives so great? And there's value in doing that because we're able to translate this into what we call positive psychology interventions, strategies, techniques, things for people to actually do differently on a daily basis. These skills have been tested, empirically validated on populations around the world, probably the last 15 to 18 years. We know they work. We know they work over time, and we know they work relative to control groups. I call these the skills to thrive. We also know that when people are happier at home, they bring that to work. When they're happier at work, they bring that at home. And here's this lovely cycle of virtue, if you will. In the same way that when people are unhappy at home, they also bring that. When they're unhappy at work, they also dump that at home as well. So helping individual employees to develop these skills can help them in two separate contexts, but can also help organizations benefit over time. So how do they benefit? Well, again, I'm a researcher. I like to look at numbers, and I like to look at evidence. We're always very skeptical until we see these lovely pieces of evidence. So I'm going to make 4 cases for you as to why organizations would do well to focus more on well-being and to focus on how organizations feel, how it feels to actually be there on an emotional level. I'm a big fan of Gallup, and they've got a lot of really amazing research. So this is a study that was just published a year and a little bit ago, in 2019, looking at, actually it was a meta-analysis. So a meta-analysis is a study of other studies and reanalyzing all of that data on a couple of different variables and really spitting out a clear answer. And what this one meta-analysis showed is they used a sample size of 339 existing studies across 73 nations, which I also like because sometimes people think, oh, well-being and happiness, this is like some weird Western thing. Actually, no. We see the same trends throughout the world. And what we did find is that greater employee satisfaction with work. They define that with getting along well with your manager, liking the people you actually work with, and actually liking what you do. So it's kind of a 3-pronged approach. And this is really what happiness boils down to, is these 3 things. And when they found that when employees were happier with these 3 things, the main benefit, interestingly enough, went to the customer. So sometimes organizations are like, oh, this is not, do we waste our effort and energy giving gifts to employees? This is not a gift to employees. Actually, this is a gift you're giving your customers. They also were more productive. So again, customers win, organizations win. Organizations win again. They were more profitable, and turnover, was negatively related with employee satisfaction, meaning there was less of it. Exhibit number 2, also looking at Little Numbers. So I just picked up the study because, again, it was just done recently, but it really just looks at one very simple variable, and that is employee happiness. That's it. And if you're wondering how we measure that, In positive psychology, we measure it through subjective well-being or life satisfaction, quite robust scales. And these have been validated worldwide and exist in a number of different languages. So we have a very good measure on how happy people are. So this study looked at 11 British telecom call centers. Now, if you look at this little photo, you see these little cubicles and you think, wow, that would be kind of boring day in and day out. There was 11 different centers scattered all over the country. 1,800 employees, 6-month period, and measuring subjective well-being, work targets, and also a bad weather index. Why a bad weather index? Well, this is the UK after all. But what they didn't want is different call centers saying, well, that's not fair. You guys work along the coast. You work in a nice, inner city London, or you work where it rains and is miserable all the time. So they actually included an index for this. And what they found was that happier employees worked faster. So quantity improved, took more calls during the shift, but also quality improved. They actually converted more of those calls to actual sales, even in these terrible weather centers. Now, what the authors also added at the end is, we have no idea why these people were happier. And it wasn't necessarily linked to work, but the fact that they were happier, what they noticed is that the happier employees ended up putting or generating these gains relative to those who were less happy, nothing to do with weather. Interesting thoughts. Another way to think about employee well-being and happiness is just through a number of disparate studies on a number of different indicators. So I just pulled some of these studies from all over, but these are kind of what we call seminal studies. People refer to these repeatedly because they're well done and they're quite robust in their findings. But what we do know is that when people are happier at work and happier with work, so two different things, happier at work and with work. They are absent less. They also have less of what we call presenteeism. These are the people who are at work, but you wish they weren't. They're just kind of warming the chair and you just think, can you just go already? Like they're not really doing anything anyway. Turnover intentions. So this is when people are unhappy for a couple of weeks or months leading up to their eventual exit, their turnover intentions, their wish to leave is pretty high. And during that period, we tend to see drop-offs in their productivity and other undermining behavior. So it's always a good signal, but that tends to go down if people are happier and still potentially leave, but for other reasons. Customer satisfaction, that one goes up again, productivity, stock market performance. So a lot of these are repetitious, but what we're seeing pretty clearly across the research is that well-being matters for the employee, but more than anybody, for the organization itself. Last exhibit, it's more thinking about the region, but this is really topical worldwide, and it's thinking about just human capital in general. So the World Bank issues a human capital index every year, every second year, and what they look at is how well countries develop and mobilize human capital potential. So yes, that does have to do with the education system. Yes, that does have to do with the labor market. And these two things will shape much of that human capital, but so will the private sector. So will the public sector. And what we find is that there's a lot of room for improvement. So the UAE, on the latest report, 67% were able to really capitalize on human capital, so use it effectively. Yemen down to 37%. I mean, it's got its own situation there, but no place scores 100%. But it's simply to say that there's a lot of room for growth. There's a lot of things that we could be doing a lot differently to improve the workplace, but also to improve people's experience of it, and to then circle back and to contribute to national development, regional development, and really, I would say global development these days. Everything we do is quite interrelated. So in short, what I've looked at is kind of all the reasons why organizations should be focused on well-being. But if you focus on the middle one, I think is maybe one we're not quite talking about yet, but some places in the world are starting to toss this idea around. So in the same way that today organizations have to show a health and occupational safety policy of some kind, I think the trends are sort of pointing to the same thing with well-being. So not just around mental health, not just around a deficit focus and trying to remove problems, but also how are we adding well-being? How are we adding value through the psychological capital that we can create with employees? So something to think about. Now, I am going to stick up for companies. I don't want to make it seem like I'm ganging up on companies. I think many organizations get this. They get it, and intuitively, I think everybody gets it. Organizations are no different than relationships. When it doesn't feel good, we start to look around and go, maybe it's time to move on. When things feel good, then we want to stay. So I think organizations get that sometimes, but they just don't know how to put it into place. And to be fair, it is a new topic. It hasn't been very clear on how are you supposed to make this happen. Sometimes they get it. Maybe they do have the skills. It's about where do you find the time? Where do you find the resources? How do you put this together? Others, as we're moving a little bit down this list, might think, our brand is enough. We pay people. Well, everybody pays, right? Or the best one I like is the last one is, sometimes you get these people who say, well, work is supposed to be bad. It's work. And we're no longer working in the coal mines. People have options today, and I think we all deserve a better working experience, and we can very certainly make that happen. And Mohammed, I did see your question about, let me just pull that up, the global average of human capital. I don't know the global average. I can definitely look it up for you. I think Africa tends to be a little bit on the lower end, Middle East, globally, regionally, and we know there's a lot of variation in the region. Yemen would be an example, right? So the average tends to be a little bit lower relative to global. But what is the specific global average? I'm not sure, but I'm happy to look that up and send that along to you. Okay, so what's the answer? Well, look, I'm not going to pretend there's only one way to do this, but from a positive psychology perspective, this is the way that, we sort of construe this. So we have a lot of good research that has been collected in the past 20 years around how to make people happier. And these are empirically validated strategies that there's probably about 50 or 60, not all lend themselves well to the workplace. Not all lend themselves well to everybody. There's also issues of personal fit, personality, timing, age, culture as well. But within that group, there's kind of something for everybody. And it is possible to teach happiness. So we know that these are skills that if people use them over time, they impact happiness in a way that is sustainable. It stays. We can move people up that scale and keep them there as well. And again, we can break that down into a number of different categories of things that we know contribute to happiness. And that's sort of what I've broken down here. One is the value of positive emotions and how do we actually generate those and make those happen. So these would be things like inspiration, curiosity, gratitude, joy, interest. There's a whole range. There's about 25 different positive emotions. But again, how do we make work feel better? We can also do work around character strengths. So getting people to identify, who are you? what are you good at? Not just in terms of work skills, but are you somebody who's very socially intelligent? Are you somebody with high levels of integrity? Are you somebody who's very courageous? Are you somebody who's funny? And how do we match that to jobs? And there's also increasingly a lot of research literature looking at these good matches. Now, it doesn't mean if you're not quite properly matched with your character strengths, you're doomed. There's other techniques, one of which is job crafting, things that we can do to match our jobs more closely to who we actually are. We can also, there's also a number of different strategies looking at how do we improve relationships. This is important when it comes to managers. I'll address them in a moment. Also thinking of meaning and purpose at work, goals, growth, learning and development. So there's a lot of different skills that we can teach people from a positive psychology perspective. What I also like about this approach is it's not only teaching people the how, but more specifically, the why. And so a lot of what we do is teach people theory, concepts, why something works, and that allows them to then personalize these strategies in ways that make sense for them. And that's important because personality does play a big role. If we think about what often gets passed off as happiness at work, it's usually tailored to very extroverted people who are quite loud and who tend to like these pizza parties. More introverted people, which could be me, I actually like my job and I like to work in peace and quiet. So this is where when you understand what's the magical ingredient in these particular theories and why strategies work, people can then use them and tailor them in a way that makes more sense for them. So that is one thing that we can do with employees. Now, this works. We know we have a lot of evidence that shows us this works, but it works better when managers are also involved. And this is critical. And if you have to choose between targeting employees or targeting managers, I would go with the managers. They are the number one reason why people quit. Even if they are happy with their work, if they're not happy with the relationship with the manager, that sort of trickles down and seeps into a lot of what people end up experiencing, certainly, but what they end up doing as well. So managers can also be trained, if you will, can also learn how to instill well-being through the relationships that they have with people on their teams. So essentially, they are focusing on very, again, theory also, but very practical skills to be able to more respectfully engage with people on their teams, recognize them. So not the blanket, yeah, thanks everybody email, but specifically, Mary, thank you. This is what you did last week. And I want to specifically identify that and say, this made me really happy when I saw it because of ABC. So how can managers really say thanks and recognize people in a way that matters and that actually means something to them? Also thinking about how they can facilitate good work, how they can trust employees, give away opportunities, empower people to become their best selves, and essentially get out of people's way. It's not that managers are the problem, but managers are often just left to their own devices to figure it out, and sometimes they get it and sometimes they don't. And so this is also a way to support managers, help and support their own team members as well. So kind of does double duty. But also the meaning of management has very much changed, particularly on the tail end of pandemic. So it's no longer about just meeting the KPIs, but it's also about listening, supporting, cheerleading, helping people become better versions of themselves. And we know how to do that today. All right, I feel like I'm talking a lot, so I'm going to end there. But I just wanted to sort of introduce you to this idea of what we mean by well-being, also kind of put forward a business case for that, but also to get you thinking about, are we losing out on opportunities by not focusing on well-being? Are we just stamping out problems There's nothing wrong with that, but it's kind of like baking bread and you're only putting it in the oven for 20 minutes when it should actually be in there for 45 minutes. So what additional greatness, awesomeness, and goodness could you pull out of the oven if we were to also not just focus on removing the negative, but adding some of the positive and the impact that could be made in that way. And then finally, life's just too short for bad days at work. We can do better. All right, I'm going to end there. If anybody has questions or comments, I'm very happy to take those. And yeah, let's chat. I think there's a
Hello.
question here. Hi.
Yeah, there are questions there, and I actually have some questions coming up on my end as well too.
Okay, wonderful.
So that's great. So the one question I have on my end here, sorry, I'm just getting myself back
Yep.
on the screen. Okay, so there we go. Hi there. So it's the well-being. The well-being is vital. So, and they really, the comments that I've had, the people are texting me. So the comments that we had are like the well-being. Is it something that you have to sort of like train yourself to do? Sort of like when you're going to the gym, you're expecting that, expecting that tavola de chocolat, which I guess is the I guess, what do they call the stomach muscles all to pop up after the very first time you go in. I think you kind of have to keep at it. That was the question. Do you have to keep at it?
Yes, you have to keep at it. And that's why happiness is so miserable, because it takes work, right? So there's a lot of different types of happiness. So there's the hedonic happiness, which is a lot easier to make happen. That's the chocolate bar. That's a lovely bouquet of flowers. That's listening to your favorite song on the radio. We get these little bursts of happiness, and we don't really need to work at those because they just kind of happen accidentally. But then there's the longer, more meaningful, deeper types of happiness that do take work. And that's where the effort comes in. And that's where it is very similar to going to the gym. You don't just go once and come out and be like, yeah, I'm ready for the beach. Yeah, no. And happiness is the same way. So it's looking at different points throughout our day, changing how we think, how we respond to situations, how we interact with people. It's maybe changing some of our assumptions we have about certain situations. It's changing our teeny tiny little habits. So, just to give you an example, I'm more in the eudaimonic type of happiness. So I have to work harder at, trying to do more of the fun stuff, but eating better cheese, right? Like it's something small, but it takes effort. It's finding little moments of joy. So that would be an example, but it's really going through your life and saying, how can I be happier? What are the different points of intervention? And doing that in the work context as well. So to answer the question, does it take work? Absolutely. And this is why it's also not just something you do, but ideally something everybody else that's around you is also doing. So if everybody at work is doing it, including the manager, now you've got a whole ecosystem to support those choices. So if we put this in a health context or physical health context, you're trying to get healthier, but nobody else is. This is going to be hard. And the cafeteria at work is just full of pizza and chocolate bar and stuff like that, which is really good. But anyway, that's going to make it harder for you as well. So this is why I always think when organizations, if you're going to embark on well-being, you have to bring everybody along. Now, yeah, you're going to have a few naysayers, but it can't just be one person doing it, or one little team doing it, or one lonely manager going, okay, we're going to do this. It's kind of like a concerted effort. It's a philosophy change. It's a different way of moving forward that we hope as many people as possible can jump on board and do, because then the effort is collective, but also the effort is easier when everybody's doing it together. That was a long way of answering a very short question.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So what was sometimes the phrase people actually use is treat yourself like you would your best friend. So, that would be, I truly believe in that. And I think that if you're sharing a workspace with people, you should also make the workspace uh, beautiful, functional, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
tidy, easy to use, those types of things. You should be proud of where you are, and that's it's a bit of everything, I guess, together. So if anyone has any other questions, I'm going to read a couple of the other questions that people send us in, because some people have
Okay.
to time out. And if
Okay.
not, if anyone else would like to actually say their question live, please put yourself up in the chat and I'll open up the microphone. So what would be your recommendation? Let's say we have a lot of connect groups, okay? And they're different, they're sector specific, okay? But let's use the one, Women in Business. We have one on the 10th, and we're actually going through, as an example, women that were asking me, is like, they might have very many hats to wear, okay? And you're saying that, sometimes they put their business for last, but so their well-being is balanced. That's the question, is how do I balance my well-being? How do I balance my well-being between work, family, and maybe ask the rest if there's anything left over.
Yeah. So I'm going to maybe take a slightly different approach. I kind of have a bit of an issue with the whole balance, work-life balance concept to begin with, because it sets up a standard, it sets up an expectation that we should all be able to have set hours for work, set hours for family, set hours for health, set hours for this. Life doesn't work that way. And maybe a better way to think about it is, how do I just get more joy regardless of what I'm doing?
Yeah.
If you like your work, do that when you feel like it. And when you no longer feel like it and you're tired and you need a break, take a break and then go do something else. So I think it's, part of it, we have these rigid, it has to look 50-50. That's never going to happen. And there's going to be some weeks where you're going to work flat out, and then maybe other weeks where you're going to have nothing. And then it's going to be beach time. And I think we could just sort of do ourselves a big favor by maybe loosening up some of those expectations and saying, look, I'm going to just be more mindful of when I'm tired, I'm getting bored, I'm getting irritated, I need a break, take one. But equally, when I've got time, how am I going to feel joy and make this moment meaningful and purposeful, and maybe eat cheese, or maybe whatever that happens to be. So yeah, I'm not always sure that's helpful to put things under the work-life balance, because then everybody ends up thinking like, oh, I failed. But you've only failed if you're using that construct. And if you're using a different construct, a different definition, a different standard, then actually you're rocking it. You're doing great. Like, carry on. So it's picking the definition that's going to work for you. If that one doesn't work, pick another one. Another way to think about this, if we think about Olympic athletes, they have zero work-life balance just in the months leading up to the Olympics. They're training and training and training and training and training, but they also know, I need to pull back here because I'm about to get injured, and I also need rest, and my performance is suffering. So they just kind of go with how they feel, but to get a nice 50-50 split, real life doesn't always work out that way. So find what works for you, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, well, I'm sure they're going to appreciate that answer. And it makes total sense, by the way. Another one said, regarding definitions, it says definitions. Sometimes we use the definition workaholic. Everything with a holic, like maybe there's a homaholic, I'm just guessing, but workaholic. And I guess maybe the term is a little bit kind of difficult to swallow. Let's put it that way, because obviously maybe they get joy out of the work.
Yeah, Again, I'm not and maybe just in contrast to what I've said, I'm also not going to sort of champion somebody maybe working 80 hours a week. I think that's a bit much, and then maybe you're a workaholic. But at the same time, I wouldn't remove joy from somebody who really likes what they do. I think about my dad. Would he have qualified as a workaholic? Probably, but he loved what he did. And he took a lot of joy in putting in those hours. He connected with people. It was all about, funny stories and, challenging himself. But like he took joy in it, even if on the surface there were a lot of hours behind it. And so my mom
Mm,
kind of learned to say, you know what, he's happy doing it. It's fine. And even after retirement, he still continued to do that. That's what brought him joy. Now, if it's taking away from your family at the same time, if it's undermining your relationships, then you may need to reconsider what is useful here for me or what is not. So, I'm not going to put like this is the set amount of hours you should work or shouldn't work, or this is what it should look like. I think we all kind of know, I might need to make some changes here, or no, I think it's okay. Maybe I need to clarify to others what I get out of this so that they understand, and maybe they're worrying less about me.
that makes amazing sense. What I'm actually hearing and listening, I think these are the types of things that every business, small or large, or even like a sole proprietaire, as they would say, like a
Mm,
one-man band,
mm,
should have allow themselves some time with this well-being, like in the sense proper guidance, because sometimes we don't see the forest for the trees, and that's why someone of your nature would be vital, because it's not just how to use your MailChimp app or how to do your posting of thing. Those are all part of the business part, but sometimes we forget about the well-being. And I believe this part of the pandemic, well-being is even more important. I think the lines have become so fuzzy because they don't know when, or especially maybe we're quite lucky here, but let's look at Canada where the lines have become so fuzzy that people are,
yeah.
yeah. So, this is something that we should look upon. Maybe we should get a workshop happening, and we could actually do even a virtual workshop for those that are still not comfortable being in person.
Mm.
And I'd like to put that forward, like sort of like voluntold for Dr. Lambert. Yes, do what you're doing.
Sure.
But
Okay.
voluntold, okay. And we're going to be mindful of the time so that everyone can get back to if they were doing something else. If there are any other questions up there, please put your hands up. And if you're not feeling comfortable with your question at stage, just put it out to the universe. Please contact us. We will make sure that Dr. Lambert gets the questions and you can connect up with her. I would recommend that all of you rewatch this on our YouTube channel, because there were so many, as they say, tips and tricks that sometimes we forget, because you're probably going, yeah, I can relate. Yeah, I can relate. Yeah. And so I think rewatching this is good for your well-being. Um, Maybe you'd like to give us some closing thoughts. I don't know.
Yeah, I do. I think sometimes well-being gets conflated with, not sometimes, a lot of the time, with merely removing the negative. So there's a lot of attention around mental health and, depression, anxiety, and, that's good. But most people aren't depressed, and most people aren't anxious. Most people are just kind of getting sick and tired of the pandemic and just want to get on with something. Um, but we still kind of focus on removing what's not working, but we forget to add other parts that are working. So my advice is, when you're tired, rest. But also, is what you do to rest refreshing and
Mm,
reinvigorating, and does it put a smile on your face? And maybe instead of resting, maybe a better option is go for a walk with your friend. Go hang
yeah.
out, go to a comedy club, watch a funny video. Like, we need to lift ourselves up as well, and not just try to dampen the negative. There's two sides to life, and we need to start finding more ways to bring more joy to life. It's short.
Yeah. That makes ideal sense, because removing, you might just create another hole that should be filled with something better.
Exactly.
So we're looking to actually hanging out some more with you and the well-being behind it. I think actually a couple of laughs, just to sign off and thank you very much, everyone, our sponsors, our obviously sister councils, the Swiss Council, everyone that helped us with this. Actually, you see us probably, I'm talking to myself, on my best behavior, because we were having so much fun in the background. Everybody go check out all the filters that you could do in the background. Actually, that's probably why we were 1 minute late, but now that the universe knows that, I just want you to have a really good time. We want you to know that myself, Dr. Lambert, the councils are all here to make sure your well-being and your business well-being is going in the right direction. Reach out to us. That's what we're here for.
Thanks,
I want to
everybody.
thank you all. Thank you. Have a fabulous day, and I can't wait to see you soon in every sense of the word.
Take care. All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Ciao. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.